Faith isn't about waiting until everything falls into place before you believe. It's about believing even when there's no evidence, no sign, no logical reason to hold on. Too often we base our expectations on what we can see, what we can measure, and what we can understand. But real faith, the kind that moves mountains, the kind that brings the impossible to pass, happens when you believe before there's any proof. Think about a farmer who plants a seed. He doesn't go out the next morning expecting to see a full harvest. He understands there's a process. First, the seed must go underground where it's unseen for weeks, maybe months. There's no visible sign of life. But just because he can't see it doesn't mean nothing is happening. Beneath the soil, that seed is breaking open, taking root, and beginning to grow. If the farmer judged the harvest by what he could see in the first few days, he might give up, dig up the soil and say, it didn't work. But he knows the truth. The harvest is coming if he doesn't give up. In life, many people miss their breakthrough because they're looking for immediate proof. They pray for healing, but the symptoms remain. They believe for promotion, but they're still in the same position. They trust for a relationship, but nothing changes. The temptation is to think, maybe it's not going to happen. Maybe I got my hopes up for nothing. But just like that seed under the ground, your faith is working even when you can't see results. When you trust God, you have to believe before the evidence appears. That's how faith works. When Abraham was told he would be the father of many nations, he had no children. His body was old, his wife was beyond childbearing age, and everything in the natural said it was impossible. But God told him to look up at the stars and count them if he could. Those stars were a visual reminder of what was coming, even when nothing around him looked like it. For years, there was no change, no sign, no reason to keep believing, except for the promise God had given him. And in time, that promise became reality. Many times, God gives us a vision, a dream, a promise. But before it happens, there's a waiting season where nothing makes sense. That's when you have to stand firm in faith. The mistake most people make is believing only when things start to improve. They need to see progress, feel momentum, or have confirmation before they get excited. But that's not faith, that's sight. Faith says, I believe even when I don't see a way. I trust even when nothing is changing. I'm confident that my breakthrough is coming. There are times in life when it feels like nothing is happening. You've prayed, you've believed, you've done everything you know to do, but the situation hasn't changed. The doors are still closed. The healing hasn't come. The relationship isn't restored. It's easy to think maybe this isn't meant to be. Maybe God isn't listening. But just because you don't see anything happening doesn't mean God isn't working. Behind the scenes, things are shifting in your favor. God is moving the right people into place, arranging divine connections, and lining up the perfect timing. The fact that you can't see it doesn't mean it's not happening. Some of the greatest miracles take time to develop. Just like a caterpillar transforming into a butterfly, much of the process happens in a hidden place. The cocoon looks lifeless, as if nothing is going on, but inside there's an incredible transformation taking place. If you judge it too soon, you'll think it's over. But in the right season, what was hidden will be revealed. Think about Joseph in the Bible. God gave him a dream that he would one day be in a position of influence, yet everything in his life seemed to move in the opposite direction. He was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. Year after year, there was no evidence that his dream was coming to pass. He could have thought, God, did you forget about me? But what he didn't realize was that behind the scenes, God was positioning him for something greater. The delays, the betrayals, the unfair treatment, they weren't stopping his destiny. They were leading him to it. Many times, what feels like a setback is actually a setup. That closed door, that disappointment, that detour, it may look like the end, but it's really God maneuvering things in your favor. You may not see it yet, but that doesn't mean it's not happening. God is orchestrating every detail, making sure everything falls into place at the right moment. When a seed is planted in the ground, the roots grow downward before anything ever breaks through the surface. If you judged it based on what you see, you'd think nothing was happening. But underground, in a place you can't see, there's incredible activity. The seed is developing, expanding, and getting ready to sprout. Your life works the same way. What you're believing for may not have manifested yet, but that doesn't mean it's not on the way. God is working, arranging, and preparing the breakthrough, even when you can't see a single sign of change. The words you speak have power. They're not just sounds coming from your mouth, they're seeds you're planting in your life. Every time you speak, you're prophesying your future. If you want to know where your life is headed, listen to the words coming out of your mouth. You can't talk defeat and expect victory. You can't talk sickness and expect health. You can't talk lack and expect abundance. What you speak, you will see. This is why it's so important to speak faith, even when circumstances don't line up. It's easy to complain, to talk about how bad things are, to focus on everything that's going wrong. But when you do that, you're reinforcing the very thing you don't want. Your words are giving life to your struggles instead of your solutions. When you keep saying, I'll never get out of debt, I'll never meet the right person, I'll never get well, you're setting the course for your life in the wrong direction. Look at the story of the Israelites. When God brought them out of Egypt, He had a promised land waiting for them, a place of abundance, freedom, and blessing. But when they saw the obstacles in their way, they started speaking defeat. We'll never defeat these giants. We're too weak. We should have stayed in Egypt. Their own words kept them wandering in the desert for 40 years. The problem wasn't the giants. It was their mindset. They had a promise from God, but their negative words blocked their blessing. On the other hand, look at David. He faced a giant too, but his words were different. While everyone else talked about how big Goliath was, David declared, "This giant is no match for my God." He spoke victory before he ever saw it. He told Goliath, "Today the Lord will hand you over to me." He wasn't describing the situation, he was declaring the outcome. His words shaped his reality. What you say in the difficult moments matters. When you face challenges, you can either magnify the problem or magnify the promise. Instead of saying, "This sickness is going to take me out," declare, "I will live and not die." Instead of saying, "I'm always struggling," declare, "I am blessed, favored, and walking in increase." Instead of saying, "I'll never get out of this mess," say, "God is making a way for me right now." Your words send out a signal to the universe, to your circumstances, and even to your own mind. When you declare something long enough, it starts to take root in your heart. You begin to believe it, and when you believe it, you start to act on it. Before long, what you spoke becomes your reality. That's why you have to be intentional about what comes out of your mouth. Even when you don't see things changing, even when life looks the opposite of what you're believing for, keep speaking faith. Just because something hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it's not going to happen. Too often when we don't see progress, when the door doesn't open right away, or when the situation doesn't improve as quickly as we hoped, we start to assume that God's answer is no. We think, maybe it's not meant to be. Maybe I heard wrong, or maybe it's too late. But the truth is, a delay doesn't mean you've been denied. A delay is not a sign that God has forgotten about you. It's often a sign that He's preparing you. When you plant a seed in the ground, there's always a waiting period before you see any growth. You don't put a seed in the soil and expect a tree to appear the next day. There's a process happening underground that you can't see. The seed has to develop roots before it can push through the surface. If the seed were to sprout too soon, it wouldn't be strong enough to withstand the elements. The delay isn't wasted time, it's necessary time. In the same way, when your dream, your breakthrough, or your answered prayer seems delayed, it's not because God is saying no. He's making sure the foundation is strong enough to support what He's about to release. Think about Joseph. He had a dream as a young man that he would one day be in a position of great influence. But instead of stepping into that destiny immediately, he went through years of setbacks, betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused and thrown into prison. From the outside, it looked like he had been denied, but in reality, God was positioning him. The years of delay were preparing him for the moment when he would step into his destiny and become second in command over all of Egypt. If he had arrived at the palace too soon, he wouldn't have been ready. God knows what He's doing. When He says yes, He will bring it to pass at the right time. The delay doesn't mean the promise is canceled. It just means there are things being worked out that you can't see. Sometimes the delay is about building your character, strengthening your faith, or refining your patience. Other times, God is aligning the right people, the right opportunity, or the right circumstances. If He gave you what you were asking for too soon, it wouldn't be a blessing, it would be a burden. Waiting is not easy. When you see others getting what you've been praying for, when doors open for people around you but remain shut for you, it's tempting to get discouraged. You might think, what's wrong with me? Why is it taking so long? But just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it's not on the way. Some blessings take time to develop because what God has planned for you is bigger than you imagine. There are seasons in life when nothing makes sense. You've been praying, believing, and doing everything you know to do, yet the situation isn't improving. The doors are still closed. The finances are still tight. The medical report hasn't changed. It feels like you're walking in the dark, unsure of where you're going, unsure of when the breakthrough will come. It's in these moments that faith is tested. Not when everything is going smoothly, but when you have every reason to quit, to turn back, to say, what's the use? But faith isn't about walking when the path is clear. It's about trusting even when you can't see the next step. When you walk in the dark, you don't have all the answers. You don't know how it's going to work out, when the situation will change or what's coming next. But you keep walking because you know that just beyond the darkness, there's something greater waiting for you. Imagine walking through a tunnel. It may feel long, it may feel endless, but no tunnel goes on forever. At some point, there's always an opening. The mistake many people make is stopping in the middle. They let fear, doubt, and discouragement convince them that the darkness is permanent. But if you stop walking, you never make it to the other side. The key is to keep moving forward, even when you don't feel like it, even when nothing looks different, even when every voice in your head tells you it's not working. In the Bible, there's a story about Peter walking on water. As long as he kept his eyes on Jesus, he was able to do the impossible. But the moment he focused on the wind and the waves, the chaos around him, he began to sink. The same thing happens in life. When you focus on the difficulty, the uncertainty, and the things you don't understand, fear takes over. But if you fix your eyes on the promise instead of the problem, you'll keep walking even in the dark. Abraham was told he would be the father of many nations, yet for years he and his wife had no children. There was no sign, no evidence, no reason in the natural to believe. But the Bible says he did not waver through unbelief, Romans 4:20. He kept walking in faith even when there was no proof that the promise would come to pass. If he had stopped believing, if he had given up in the waiting season, he never would have seen what God had in store. Life will bring moments when you don't understand why things are taking so long, why doors remain shut, why your prayers seem unanswered. It's in these moments that faith is most important. Not when the answer appears, but when you have every reason to quit. Keep walking, even when you don't see progress. Keep believing, even when there's no visible change. Keep trusting, even when the way forward seems uncertain. Doubt has a way of creeping in at the most critical moments. When you're on the verge of breakthrough, when you're about to step into something new, when you've been believing for a long time and nothing seems to be changing, it whispers, "Are you sure this is going to work? What if you're wrong? What if you fail?" If you listen to doubt long enough, it will talk you out of the very thing God has prepared for you. Every great destiny comes with moments of uncertainty. When God gives you a promise, He doesn't always show you every detail. He doesn't always give you a roadmap with clear instructions. He asks you to trust Him, to move forward in faith, even when it doesn't make sense. But doubt tries to keep you stuck. It magnifies the obstacles, makes the risks seem bigger, and convinces you that you're not qualified, not ready, not capable. Look at Moses. When God called him to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, he was full of doubt. He said, "Who am I to do this? What if they don't believe me? I'm not a good speaker." He had a list of reasons why he couldn't fulfill his destiny. But God didn't choose Moses because of his qualifications. He chose him because of his obedience. If Moses had let doubt win, he never would have stepped into his purpose. Doubt is subtle. It disguises itself as logic, as caution, as being realistic. It will tell you, you're just being careful. You're just thinking things through. But in reality, doubt is a dream killer. It keeps you in your comfort zone when God is calling you to greater things. It convinces you to play it safe when faith is asking you to step out. Peter experienced this firsthand when he walked on water. As long as he kept his eyes on Jesus, he was fine. But the moment he focused on the storm, the wind, the waves, the uncertainty, he started to sink. That's what doubt does. It takes your eyes off the promise and puts them on the problem. It makes you forget who you are and whose you are. In life, you'll never have all the answers. You'll never have 100% certainty before you step into something new. At some point, you have to silence doubt and move forward in faith. You have to choose to believe even when you don't see a way, even when fear is trying to hold you back. Because every time you doubt, you delay your destiny. Every time you hesitate, you put off what God has already declared over your life. Doubt is not just a feeling, it's an enemy that stands between you and the future you were created for. It's one thing to pray for something, but it's another thing to prepare for it. Faith isn't just believing, it's getting ready as if the answer is already on the way. When you truly believe that what you're asking for is coming, your actions will reflect that belief. You won't sit back and wait for things to happen. You'll start making room for what you've been praying for. Too often people ask for big things but don't prepare for them. They pray for a new job but never update their resume. They ask for a spouse but never work on becoming the right partner themselves. They believe for financial increase but don't create a budget or learn to manage money well. They want the blessing but they don't position themselves to receive it. Faith is not just about hoping. It's about aligning your actions with your expectations. When Noah was told a flood was coming, there was no sign of rain. The skies were clear and everything seemed normal. But God gave him instructions to build an ark, and he started preparing even when there was no evidence of what was coming. If Noah had waited for confirmation, if he had said, "I'll start building when I see the clouds forming," he would have been too late. His preparation proved his faith. In the same way, you have to prepare in faith before you see the breakthrough. If you're believing for a baby, start getting the nursery ready. If you're praying for a house, go look at homes even if you don't have the money yet. If you're asking for a promotion, start dressing, working, and thinking like the leader you want to be. When God sees that you're serious, when He sees that you're making room for what He has promised, He will open the right doors. A woman in the Bible had been struggling with a severe medical condition for 12 years. She had spent all she had on doctors, but nothing worked. When she heard that Jesus was coming to town, she didn't just sit back and wish for healing. She got up, pushed through the crowd, and reached out to touch the hem of His garment. She prepared for her healing by moving toward it. Her faith wasn't passive, it was active. And because she took action, she received what she had been believing for. Many times, people are waiting on God, but God is waiting on them. He's waiting for you to step out, to act like the answer is already on its way. He's waiting to see if you're making space for the blessing you've been asking for. If you're praying for rain, don't just sit around. Get your umbrella ready. If you're believing for an opportunity, start sharpening your skills now. If you're asking for something big, show God that you're ready to handle it. Because when you prepare in faith, you're positioning yourself to receive what He has already set in motion. Feelings are powerful. They can push you toward your destiny or they can hold you back. They can make you feel unstoppable one day and completely defeated the next. If you live based on how you feel, you'll be on an emotional roller coaster. Excited and confident when things are going well, discouraged and doubtful when things aren't. But faith isn't about feelings. It's about choosing to trust God even when your emotions are telling you the opposite. There will be days when you don't feel like believing. You don't feel like being grateful. You don't feel like forgiving. But if you let feelings dictate your actions, you'll miss out on what God has for you. Feelings are temporary, but God's promises are eternal. Just because you feel afraid doesn't mean you have to act afraid. Just because you feel discouraged doesn't mean you have to live discouraged. Just because you feel unqualified doesn't mean you're not chosen. You have to make a decision. I'm not going to let my feelings run my life. I'm going to stand on the truth, not on my emotions. David had to make this decision. When he faced Goliath, there's no doubt that fear tried to creep in. He was just a shepherd boy going up against a giant warrior. But instead of listening to fear, he listened to faith. He declared, the same God who delivered me from the lion and the bear will deliver me from this giant. His feelings told him, you're too small, you're too inexperienced, you're not strong enough. But he didn't let those feelings move him. He moved forward in faith, and because of that, he stepped into his destiny. Joseph had to make this decision too. He was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. He had every reason to feel bitter, angry, and forgotten. But if he had let those feelings take over, he would have missed the opportunity to step into his purpose. Instead, he chose to keep serving, to keep trusting, to keep doing the right thing, even when everything in him probably wanted to give up. Because he wasn't moved by feelings, he ended up exactly where God had planned for him to be. Your feelings may tell you to quit on your dream because it's taken too long. They may tell you to settle for less because you're tired of waiting. They may tell you that you'll never be free from that addiction, that struggle, that stronghold. But feelings don't get the final say. Faith does. The enemy works through emotions because he knows they're unpredictable. One moment you're full of confidence, and the next you're second guessing everything. But when you stand on what you know instead of what you feel, you become unshakable. The strongest people aren't those who never have doubts, fears, or moments of weakness. They're the ones who refuse to let those feelings control them. They get up and move forward even when everything in them says to stop. They choose discipline over emotion, persistence over discouragement, and faith over fear. They don't wait to feel strong before they take action. They take action, and that's what makes them strong. Before anything manifests in your life, you have to see it in your spirit. You have to believe it before you hold it, speak it before you see it, walk in it before it becomes reality. Too often, people wait for circumstances to change before they allow themselves to believe, but that's not how faith works. Faith is about seeing it on the inside long before you see it on the outside. If you can't picture yourself healed, restored, successful, or walking in purpose, then it's going to be hard for it to happen. God works through vision. Throughout the Bible, when He wanted to do something great in someone's life, He first gave them a vision of what was to come. When He told Abraham he would be the father of many nations, Abraham didn't have a single child. But God took him outside and told him to look at the stars in the sky, saying, "So shall your descendants be." He was giving Abraham a picture of what was coming. Before the promise ever became reality, Abraham had to see it in his spirit. The same is true for you. If you're believing for a breakthrough, a dream, or a new opportunity, you have to start seeing it before it happens. You have to visualize yourself walking in that blessing, stepping into that new level, experiencing what God has promised. It's not wishful thinking. It's aligning your spirit with what God has already declared over your life. The woman with the issue of blood in the Bible had been suffering for 12 years. Nothing had worked, and every doctor had told her there was no hope. But when she heard Jesus was coming, she didn't sit back in doubt. She saw herself healed before it happened. She said to herself, "If I can just touch the hem of His garment, I will be healed." That was her vision. She wasn't healed yet, but she saw it in her spirit. She imagined it, believed it, and acted on it. Because she saw it first, she received it. This is why it's important to guard your mind. If all you see is failure, lack, and obstacles, that's what you'll move toward. But if you see yourself thriving, overcoming, and walking in victory, that's the direction your life will go. Your vision sets the course for your future. You can't walk into something you haven't first seen on the inside. Even when nothing around you looks like it's changing, you have to keep the vision alive. If you're believing for restoration in your family, see it in your spirit. Picture those relationships healed, laughter in your home, love and unity restored. If you're believing for financial increase, see yourself debt-free, walking in abundance, being generous. If you're praying for a new opportunity, see yourself in that position, walking through that open door. Your mind will try to tell you it's impossible, that it's too late, that there's no way. But faith says, I see it before I see it. I believe it before it happens. Life has a way of making us feel like we're falling behind. We look around and see others getting what we've been praying for, stepping into opportunities we've been waiting on, reaching milestones that seem out of our reach. The temptation is to think, when is it going to happen for me? Did God forget about me? Have I missed my chance? But what we have to remember is that God's timing is never off. He's not in a hurry, yet He's never late. He knows exactly when to open the right doors, when to bring the right people, and when to release what He has promised. It's easy to get impatient when things aren't happening on our schedule. We want to see progress now, the breakthrough now, the blessing now, but just because you don't see movement doesn't mean God isn't working. Sometimes He's developing you for what He has prepared. Other times He's orchestrating details behind the scenes, aligning circumstances you can't see, making sure everything is in place so that when the time is right, what He has for you will be greater than what you imagined. Look at Joseph's life. He had a dream that he would be in a position of leadership, but instead of stepping into it immediately, he went through years of trials, betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused and thrown into prison. In the natural, it seemed like everything was going in the opposite direction, but all along God was setting things up. If Joseph had been promoted too soon, he wouldn't have been ready. If he had gotten bitter, given up, or settled in disappointment, he would have missed his destiny. But because he trusted in God's timing, he stepped into a position of influence at exactly the right moment. Not too early, not too late, but at the perfect time. Abraham and Sarah were given a promise that they would have a child, but year after year passed with no sign of a baby. They got discouraged, they questioned, and at one point, they even tried to make it happen on their own. But the promise didn't come in their timing, it came in God's. When Sarah was 90 years old, long after it seemed possible, she gave birth to Isaac. It was a reminder that God is never limited by time, by age, by circumstances, or by human expectations. When He makes a promise, He brings it to pass at the perfect moment. Waiting is never easy. It can be frustrating when it feels like nothing is happening, when you've been faithful, when you've done your part, yet things remain the same. But delay doesn't mean denial. It doesn't mean God has forgotten about you. Sometimes what feels like a delay is actually divine protection. God knows what you're ready for. He knows what's best for you. He knows what doors need to stay closed and what opportunities need to wait. When the timing is right, no person, no mistake, no opposition will be able to stop what He has planned.